Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. Never heard it. I don't think I'm alone on this one. I feel like a lot of people didn't even know this album came out when it did. License to Ill was one of the first albums I ever even listened to, but it took another 3 years for this album to come out. Back then we didn't have the internet, so we didn't know what was going on. They were fighting with their label, but obviously we didn't know that, so we just thought that they were one-hit wonders and they disappeared. And when this album came out, I don't think hardly anyone really picked it up. The record label hardly promoted this album. There were only 2 singles as opposed to, I think License to Ill had 6 singles on it. This one only had 2. So I think a lot of people didn't hear this album. I probably didn't check for Beastie Boys again until 1992 with Check Your Head. So I don't think I even knew that this album existed until like years later when people were saying it was a classic record. The album starts out with the intro track to All the Girls. The really slow fade in on this album makes you lean in and be like, are my speakers okay? And it's basically just them naming a bunch of different types of women for 20 seconds or so. Next we have Shake Your Rump, and when I heard this song, the first thing I thought was, this is where Beck got his whole style. This is everything. When everybody else was ignoring this album, he was definitely listening to this. By the time I got to the third track, Johnny Rael, I just really appreciated their commitment to who they were. They didn't change their style at all. They rapped exactly the same. Even though the style of rap was changing, they still stuck with this sound, which is amazing. And the level of commitment and all the samples. I'm only like 3 songs in and it's already like 10 samples. Different times, different times. Next we have High Plains Drifter, which is the closest thing to License to Ill, specifically Paul Revere. By the time I got to this point in the album, I realized if I had heard this in 1989, I might be a different person. My eyes started to water when I heard how beautiful this album is. The layered samples, how much work was put into it. It's like, I mean, there's only a handful of albums where I felt this way, where I went back and listened to old albums and I was like, oh man, I'm sorry I missed it. But like, this is the first time where I was like, I really should have been listening to this album for the past 30 years. Just 3 songs in, I'm completely blown away. 3-minute rule. The song is actually longer than 3 minutes, but if you count the time where they're actually rapping, it's about 3 minutes. This is one of the few Beastie Boys songs where each one of them has their own verse, which if you know the Beastie Boys, that is very unusual. Next we have Hey Ladies, which is the first single from the album. I wasn't a big fan of this song or the video back then. When hearing it in the context of the album, I don't feel any better about it. Although I believe the drum track on the end of this song is where Jay Dilla got the drum beat from Raise It Up. 5-Piece Chicken Dinner is a 20-second hootenanny. After the hootenanny, this album takes a very dark turn with Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun. It's a very dark, aggressive, guitar-laced track. It kind of sounds like the prototype for Sabotage. And the album just continues to get darker and darker with Car Thief. What Comes Around, which is a pre-woke Beastie Boys record. A lot of negative talk about mostly women. These guys are still smoking dust, drinking brews, and partying it up. They're just a lot more focused musically. Shadrach is the second single from the album, and it's the first music video directed by Nathaniel Hornblower. And then the album kind of ends with Ask for Janice, which is a commercial for Paul's Boutique. Next we have B-Boy Bouillabaisse, which is a 9-song suite that lasts about 12 minutes. Sometimes this album is compared to the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, but this specifically reminded me of the Beatles' Abbey Road, where the rest of the album is just a suite of 1 to 2 minute songs that are just like really small ideas that they kind of just all put together. I had never heard the original version of Hello Brooklyn, which Jay-Z and Lil Wayne did years later. And then the album ends exactly where it began, with To All the Girls. I definitely see why this album is a classic. You can't listen to this album one time and completely get everything that's on it. It's really tough to unpack, which is the type of album that I absolutely love. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be listening to this album for, years to come. So have you heard Paul's Boutique? What did you think of it? Are you still listening to it to this day? I put up new videos 2 times a week. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.